It's a great honor and a privilege to introduce Yaakov, Jackie, Aviad. Your name that you grew up in Germany was Wolfsburg, and we, together with Eva, your beautiful wife, we're here in your magnificent home in Jerusalem. And you, Ken and Hora, are going to be 97 soon.
Yeah.
97 years young. It's incredible.
Yes. It's luck. It's real luck.
It's luck and good genes, actually.
And it helps having a wonderful wife as well.
It helps having me as your wife.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Yaakov or Jackie, can you mention a little bit about being born in Berlin? You were born in 1925. A little bit about your parents and your family.
Look, my father had been in the German army even before he got his medical
licenses.
They took the Germans took everybody who was studying medicine or who had passed his German exams. They needed people all over, and then they sent them out to their colonies or to their friends, to Russia and to Poland and to Russia, and very soon, when taking more of Russia, they sent groups into the Russian territory, and they opened little hospitals for their own people and for the people who may need them. So they practiced medicine before they'd actually got the title. And when in 1918, when everyone was sent out, and he went to the university in Berlin to ask for exams and okays to show that he needs a German title. And when they heard his experience of 4 years in the field, as a man in his early 20s, they said, "You know so much about medicine, you've seen so much, you'll get a title." And they gave him a title and the job.
Straight away.
Straight away.
Yeah.
Can I get you something to drink? I'll get you a little water to have while you're speaking, okay?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Right.
And here's a picture of your father.
That's my father, yeah.
Was he born in Germany?
He was born in Hamburg, and his father was
There's another picture of your father.
Here.
and this is my mother, who was, and this is my mother.
Was a daughter.
She was of the first generation in modern Russia when Jews had high schools, real high schools. They knew how to read and write Hebrew letters, but they didn't know anything else, And then in one generation, you had a husband who was, who had a big experience in wars and medicine, in Zionism, in every respect.
And your mother, where did she come from?
She came from Ruzhany
Near Slonim, no?
It's near Slonim. But then they moved with 6 or 7 children, they moved to Slonim because it had schools. It opened schools for Jewish, and the Jews wanted to study with other Jews, So they had to recruit some of the teachers were not even Jewish, but you had to find teachers. So they brought in teachers for the non-Jewish subjects, and they did it all through the war. And then during the war, when the Russians took over and things changed, they were pushed out, and my mother had met my father, who used to come to their house on Shabbos and Yom Tov, etc., because that was a kosher home in Slonim, a real kosher home. And a year after he left for Berlin, she went to visit him in Berlin, and they decided to get married.
And what year was this, roughly?
But
What year
was this?
this was 19 or 20.
2000.
And then my sister was born in 20 or 21, and I in 25, and another brother a little later.
3 years later.
And I think
yes.
we have a picture of you and your sister.
Yes. This was here. That was when you were a baby. Here, take that.
Yeah.
It's going to. That's wonderful. And you grew up in Berlin.
Who is that?
You.
No, I only to my 8th birthday. On the night of my 8th birthday, we were on a train to run away to, it was the beginning of the Nazi period in early March or late March of 1933.
But Yaakov, do you remember living in Berlin? What do you recall from?
Look, what does a child of 8 years remember? So my memory goes down from 7 to 0, and we had relatives in Warsaw, my grandparents who had to leave,
Russia.
the Jewish
Russia.
life in the East wasn't very good. So Jews left if they had to live on the land.
That was your mother's family, correct?
She was born in Różnojo.
Yes, I know, but the family in Poland that you went to see were from your mother's side.
It was, yes.
And you went to visit in Poland?
But
You went to visit your family in Poland?
They went to
yes,
Poland.
we left Germany because there was a threat against my father, because he was a very active
He
Zionist.
was head of Mizrahi.
Your father
So
was
he-
head of Mizrahi.
He left in the early days, early 20s of March 1933.
Did he feel that it was going to be unsafe?
Oh, he was. They came to give him a hard time and to demand money and to terrible behavior. He went to his lawyer, and his lawyer says, with his new Nazi party, that was in early 1933, he said, take a train and go. If you've got a valid passport and visas, take a little valise. Don't show that you're leaving, but you're going on a trip. So on a Friday afternoon, even though he was religious, he took a train to Zurich. And within a week, they came to ask for the money that they have asked of my father. So my mother said, well, I have to make the arrangements. And she sent them away. And she ran off to the same lawyer who said, you're in real danger. You know, these people, the Nazis, I don't know where they're going, but they'll start dealing with rich and big German Jews, and God knows what they'll do tomorrow or the day after. So he said, get out, don't tell anybody where you're going. Tell your maid to leave the family until you can call her back. She locked the house, she made a few suitcases, but she had all the relatives in Warsaw and another Polish cities. So we got on a train. I thought I was going to visit my grandparents in Hamburg. And my mother woke us up and said, we are going to Poland and then to Palestine because we are leaving Germany. Germany is becoming dangerous. And once we were in Warsaw, I had 2 aunts and 1 uncle. I had 3 families. My grandfather, who was a Zionist all his life, came to live in Palestine in 31, I believe. My parents were here after in Palestine in the disturbances of 30. After the disturbances of 29, there were big disturbances.
Yeah, sure.
In Hebron
So-
and,
Yes, and-
Yeah,
Oh,
and so my parents went to visit the Jews who suffered in Palestine in 30. And my mother came back by way of Warsaw, and my grandfather was a big Zionist, and she said, why are you sitting in Warsaw speaking Polish? It's a crazy story, you know. And within several months, my grandfather and grandmother, who were Zionists all their lives, packed their things and went to live in Tel Aviv. They had 1 daughter. The youngest daughter married a Zionist and already lived in Jerusalem. And she had 2 cousins who were kibbutz founders. So there was, and he came to the country for which he worked as a Zionist all his life. So to him, a man in his 60s, I guess.
Your father?
My
Or
grandfather.
Your grandfather.
Yeah, my father was 10 or 15 years younger.
You're much older
So
than that.
they took their things, they took their books and their, their Torah scroll, etc., and they went to settle in 31 in Tel Aviv. And then from Jaffa we called from Jaffa we called the relatives in Palestine, and we said, I'm probably coming with my husband.
From Warsaw.
Yeah,
From
we'll
Warsaw.
come. And my father was doing a certain interesting line of studies in modern medicine.
In medicine, in Switzerland.
In Zurich.
Zurich.
So he stayed in Zurich for a few months, and we were in Warsaw, and we went to Slony, we went to the Russian border, etc. And then and there was no school anymore. It was the middle of the end of the school year. And towards the Jewish holidays, they put us into 2 or 3 schools in Jerusalem, and we took
When you came here.
we took a boat from Italy to Palestine, and my father came a few weeks later for the holidays.
Okay, Yaakov, I just want to ask you, because there's so much to speak about.
Yeah.
Here we have this is incredible, from the 1st of March 1934, a Mizrahi card from your...
Father, probably.
This was from Miriam
It's a younger
Wolfsberg.
Oh,
Yeah,
Miriam
Yeah, and this
Wolfsberg.
is from 1934, from Hamburg. And it's from
It's the very
Mizrahi.
beginning of
It's Miriam Wolfsberg, who
it
was
was
your aunt.
my youngest aunt, who was youngest
A sister.
youngest sister of my father's, who and there was a grandfather as well, and the grandfather died within a year. He was run over by a car
Where, in Germany or here?
in Germany.
And your father, was he was very involved with the Mizrahi.
Yes,
He was
head of
about,
Mizrahi.
he was of the heads of the Mizrahi in Germany,
In Berlin.
and even the head of
Yes.
the national. And he took part in all the
Yeah.
Zionist
Conferences.
meetings, congresses, etc. He was, I think, in his late 20s when he got into all of these things. With the
So he knew, he knew Yosef Burg from Germany.
Joseph Burg was our, when I married him, I have a different background, but he was one of our best men, Joseph Burg, because his father, Oscar Wolfsberg, worked together with him when they were, with the National Religious Party. And I also told you that when his father became the first ambassador, when Israel became a state, he was sent through Mizrahi, through the National Religious Party. Borg must have pushed him to become the first ambassador to the Scandinavian countries. So that was when they were already here.
It's
of
amazing
course.
because Burg's wife was a Slonim.
Well, did you know
And
that?
she was a Slonim, yeah?
Yeah.
And they have a connection with Hebron as well. So
Yeah,
that's
it's all-
why that's why I think your family, in the 30s they went to see, because it's all connected.
Yeah, I can show you pictures of our wedding with Josef Borg if you like.
Sure, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I just want to ask you, Yaakov, I know it's many years ago, but when you grew up in Berlin, do you remember your home? Do you remember going to primary school, to like a garden or to a nursery school?
Yes,
or-
of course.
Jewish.
I went to a Jewish school where Hebrew was taught on top of German, together
This
with
was in
German.
Berlin.
In Berlin.
Yes, in Berlin. And we had a teacher, like a lady, and the gentleman who used to walk out with us, etc., especially with my sister, who was a few years older. And my parents wanted her to know Hebrew. So there was somebody in the house like several times a week just to teach her, and I didn't learn very much. I was 6 or 7 years old, and I
What did you learn in
learned
school?
I wrote the alphabet and everything else together with the other alphabet, you know.
But you were learning Hebrew in school nevertheless, and you
Of
were there
course,
when
yes.
you were 8 years
But
old.
I was learning more because we had a lady who came to the house, or a gentleman, to teach us practical Hebrew, you know.
And do you remember going to the synagogue?
There was a synagogue very near where we lived.
Was it the Packhofstrasse? Did you live in the Packhofstrasse, which was close to the what is today in Berlin, the large department store?
Yes. I try to remember. Yes, well,
I remember.
But you remember going to synagogue, to the main shul?
I think the synagogue we used to go to was on our street. I think it was a smaller synagogue on the Passauer Straße.
Passauer Straße.
We didn't live on the Passauer, but off the Passauer.
Well, it was Passauer
In
Straße.
business, Western Berlin, a very active Berlin. And a year or two before we left, they took a much bigger apartment, and he had his practice in the house, also in Berlin. And my mother left everything. The glass, the silver, the books, everything was left with father in Switzerland and we in
Poland.
In Poland.
Listen to this
So
story.
my mother left me with one uncle there, and my children with another aunt who had a large house.
Brother.
And she as a Russian person, or one-time Russian, she got a German passport right away after marrying my father. So she had a new German passport.
And
she had a little valise, and she went to Berlin.
She went back to Berlin
in order to liquidate the house.
Wow.
And she never went. This really takes a lot of courage. She never went back into her house. It was a 6 or 7 room apartment in Western Berlin, a very fancy part of the city, where father had a practice and where we lived, but it was a very large place. She never went back. She went to stay with friends with a foreign passport, not Germans, and she started going around to the KaDeWe and to everywhere to compliment everything. She was a youngly married woman who didn't have so much money, so she needed more silver and more glass and more
china. She had enough
china.
money for that, you see.
She went around without going to the house. She drew up whatever money they had from a bank. When everything was finished, she had everything sent to Palestine.
Wow.
Everything from Berlin, and no problem, no control of the Nazis. Nobody knew anything, and nobody ever saw her coming and going because she never returned
She
to
sent
her
the
house.
housekeeper to do everything.
Wow.
And she came back to, and my father in Switzerland didn't know anything, because if he had heard that she's going to Berlin to collect his books and everything we had, you know, all the Jewish things, all the kosher things, Sefer Torah, everything was with it. And when all of this was all right, she was all right. But
It's very courageous what she did.
She was very courageous, and
That's
that's why
incredible.
Jackie remembers the story so well.
yeah.
Because
But we had traveled as little children up to 8. We traveled a lot because we had, to begin with, we had grandparents in Warsaw, two aunts and one uncle in Warsaw, other uncles and relatives in Holland, and who lived in Berlin, in Switzerland.
in Hamburg,
Yeah.
you had
No, these are people who lived on the Rhine somewhere near the Dutch border. And they moved into Holland when everything was still normal, you know. And we were very fortunate because we had grandparents in Tel Aviv, an uncle and an aunt and cousins in Jerusalem. And my mother had 2 cousins who were in kibbutzim. And as time went on, whoever wanted to come, my parents arranged for them to come.
Which kibbutzim were they at? Do you remember the names of the kibbutzim?
Yes, it's the kibbutzim
in the north, no?
yeah, but it was not only, it was moshavim that arrived before the kibbutzim, because the kibbutzim were just were just forming after the war.
Take something to drink.
We have some more pictures, Eve, if we could just show.
Yeah, all these pictures you have.
And I think these pictures your mother got back from the house. By her going back,
Sure.
that's why we have these pictures today.
Yes,
We
of
have
course.
everything.
Yes.
Not only that, but she had.
If you could just show.
Okay, this is also, this was Jackie when you were, how old were you here, Jackie? Do you remember? 3, 2?
Probably 5 or 6.
No, I think younger than that.
This is the little Israeli already.
This is when you came here.
Lapse of 10 years. If it has a date on it, does it?
1938.
28?
28.
Sorry, 28.
1928.
It's a
Okay,
little
so he
too
was,
early.
so he was,
28.
yes,
I was
so
only
he
that's
was
fine.
born in
25.
28.
Yeah.
No, it's 36, I think.
Oh yeah, you're right. It says
It's 36.
1936.
36. And,
If it was 36, I was 11.
11.
And they arrived
this is well, how old were you in this?
This is Berlin.
There was still Berlin, yes.
Yeah, this is between 8 and 9.
No, you were younger than
7
that.
and 8.
No, he's, I
And
think
this
he
is
was
also
younger
in
than
Berlin.
that.
It's all still in Berlin.
This was odd. This is much
These are
younger.
This is
magnificent.
younger.
And this was a
these
picture of you.
pictures-
This
This
is my
one here,
father after he
you-
left the German army.
After you left the German army, okay.
Yes.
And this, oh,
And this is in early Palestine.
Early
in the,
Palestine.
In the
Yeah.
30s.
Okay, this is when
and
you
this
arrived.
picture here is when your father was still in the army, in the German army, and there's your mother. So
Yeah,
there
that's
must
a
have been
Slonim.
that was a Slonim.
Oh,
So
this
when
is a
he
picture in
visited, that
Slonim.
was his picture in Slonim.
This is
It's a-
amazing that it survived.
It's I look at it, it's sort of falling apart, but it's
Look,
still there.
everything she
This is
sent
the
from
original.
there arrived.
But what's also amazing is that they saw the writing on the wall when they
Yes,
were warned
yes.
to leave in 33, because a lot of people thought that this was going to be a passing phase, that he won't stay in power, and
Yes, but you
but
see,
they took it very seriously.
but the people who were in the leading group, he was the head of Mizrahi, and so I mean, he was and he went to all congresses in Switzerland,
Yeah.
etc. So
Those were when he
when
was
the,
in the army.
the Nazis thought he was a
Oh,
very,
this is your father in the army.
That was your father in the army, in the German.
that's right, yes.
And this
Then
is
he was in his early 20s. I tell you, he didn't finish his studies in medicine because they mobilized everybody who could help. And they had so much experience in 4 years of medical work that they said, you can get a title, you know, as much as a
Yeah, well,
student.
you already told that story,
Right.
yes.
But can I just ask you, Jackie, growing up in Berlin, did you have any non-Jewish friends, or was it mainly you
Well,
associated
my
with?
father worked in big hospitals, and of course he treated Jews and non-Jews. Some of his teachers were Jewish, some of the professors of medicine, some were not Jewish. But I tell you, Berlin of after the war was not anti-Semitic. It started being anti-Semitic in the early 30s.
When
So
Hitler came
you
into
growing
power.
up, did you ever experience, I know you were only until 8, but
Yes.
do you remember any anti-Semitic incidents growing up till the
Did
age
you
of
have
8?
any?
As a little boy, no.
No.
But Germany was not anti-Semitic. I mean, all Christian countries are not very friendly to Jews. So you didn't hit Jews, and you didn't steal them, and you didn't take their houses away, and you didn't
Not
molest the women.
Not
I mean,
then.
all of this didn't exist. It was a normal country.
Until-
But they had a feeling, first of all, they had a feeling because they were the first people who were hit by the Nazis.
Nazis.
Also to get money to. So the moment is, they thought my father was rich. We know that he wasn't rich. He had been a student. He had been a soldier without a title or without a doctorate when he was in his 20s. So he was given all the possibilities, and they gave him the papers for full membership of the German
medical. He was in the...
Yes, the medical, he was a part of everything. He was a member of all the commissions and all the...
And can I just ask, who did your father and your mother, did they associate with other leaders of the Jewish community in Germany?
Very much, but mostly with the Zionists. But Berlin was full of Jews. I mean, you couldn't run away from... You couldn't live in Berlin without going to a synagogue and without, celebrating everything.
And you spoke German at home?
Yeah, sure.
You grew up speaking German?
Mother spoke Russian and Yiddish. Yiddish with her parents, and with her brothers and brothers-in-law. She spoke Russian. She spoke Russian.
And she
but
learned
they
German.
studied French and German at school, in that little school in Slonim. And she never learned too much Hebrew, but she
like
could.
me.
Yeah, exactly. Second generation.
What did you speak to your parents in German or in
I
English?
spoke German to my mother all the time to Palestine, and she spoke German mostly with her friends, or Russian, or Yiddish. I mean, there were many languages. And as far as we are concerned, we spoke German only to our mother, and Hebrew from the first day with my father. He knew Hebrew, he wanted to speak Hebrew. A year after he came, he became the head of children's medicine
Here in
Kupat Cholim in Jerusalem. And there was only one
sick fund.
Yeah, in Jerusalem.
There was the Klalit.
There was only one place for Kupat Cholim. Kupat Cholim was very new, right? Kupat Cholim was founded in the teens or in the early 20s. And he was there the first year. He didn't have too much of a living. But the doctor, the first doctor, lady doctor, of a children's department in Jerusalem, of Histadrut, of Kupat Cholim, this woman died young. And they telephoned to my father, they said, Wolfsburg, they had heard of it. They said, the doctor's dead and you have to come. He didn't make any arrangements for them, no agreements. He said, these people are sick, I'm coming. And he stayed there for 30 years. I mean,
So I want to ask you, because it's so unbelievable, when your mother left with you and your sister and your brother, and you went to Warsaw, do you remember going on that trip? Do you remember leaving your home in Berlin?
The train trip?
No, because they didn't tell us anything. They said, we're taking a train and we're going to the grandparents in Hamburg.
But you didn't go to Hamburg, you went to Warsaw.
Yeah.
We went to Warsaw, but they woke us up at night.
To tell them that they were out of Germany. It was just a way to not to go into long detailed explanations.
And my mother was alone with the 3 children and a few suitcases, not too much in order not to be suspicious. She was going for Pesach to the grandparents of her children.
And Yaakov, what do you remember of Warsaw? Do you remember the city? Do you remember your grandparents in Warsaw?
Yes, because we went there for every Yom Tov. If we didn't go to Warsaw, to one sect, we went to the other relatives in
Hamburg.
In Hamburg. And the school was a Jewish school, so they gave you a vacation for all the Jewish days, right?
Yeah.
There was never a problem, and not for 7 or 8 year children, not to get a vacation for Yom Tov.
And the life in Warsaw, was it very different from in Germany, pre-war?
You weren't there very long. How long were you in Warsaw together before you actually came to...
From the spring to the fall.
Oh, so it wasn't that long. And you went to school? You went to school when you were in Warsaw?
No.
They went, so basically you arrived there in time for the summer, and then early in September, October, you must have
We were
come
already
here.
back and we were in Palestine.
They were already in Palestine for the school year that started, I guess, in September.
And after the parents had been there as visitors 2 years earlier, not suspecting, he had a very good job and they had an enormous place to live in Berlin. I mean, they moved to this enormous 6-room apartment and left everything because the health
And can I just ask, did they manage to sell the apartment in Berlin? Or
Well,
did
it wasn't ours because
They were
the apartments in
renting.
Berlin were rental.
But
No,
you-
but
but
she
you're-
had everything packed without showing up.
Amazing.
And
That is
everything
incredible.
wandered off for 6 months or so to a reserve place
to a
in
storage-
Haifa.
To
Yeah.
a storage room.
So I just want to show, because this is really quite amazing. I have this at home as well. This is the Encyclopedia Judaica, and inside it has, under your father, Yeshayahu Aviad, and it has a whole entry, physician and Zionist leader, and the president of Mizrahi in Germany. That was an amazing thing that your father, what he only achieved, and that's incredible.
Look, he was a very intelligent man, a cultured man, a very Jewish man, a very cultured. When he studied in Germany, most of it was in the very best schools. I mean, and he went to a high school in Hamburg. So I mean, he was a cultured German and he was a religious Jew.
Wow, it's incredible. And when you went to Poland and then you went on the boat with your mother,
To what? To
your father was still studying in
Switzerland.
Switzerland.
he
was
was
still
there.
working.
There was a certain time that you have to give the
Swiss?
the hospital
Switzerland?
in Switzerland, yes, in
Oh.
Zurich. And we had many friends. For him, it was normal. He used to go to congresses in Switzerland in years before, in the 20s, etc. He was in Switzerland several times every year.
And can I just ask you, because it's amazing, Yaakov, when you had to leave Warsaw, when you didn't have to leave, but when your mother decided that you're now going to Palestine, which is under the British mandate, it was very fortunate that you got certificates to come into
We
Palestine.
went without the certificate because it was the end of the summer and they were not distributing things. So my father and mother arranged by telephone that they're going as tourists for the children for the Jewish holidays.
That's
Oh.
amazing.
And then,
I didn't know that either.
towards the end of 33, when it came in, he was at the head of the list because he was a very distinguished Zionist, you know, there was no question. And the following year, my grandfather in Hamburg fell under a car and was injured and died in Hamburg. And there was my grandmother and his daughter. And so when they were through with the dying of the, we brought them and we got papers. There was no problem, you know. If you were in Yachtzen, you could go.
Because the British, they restricted the amount of
People coming
certificates
in.
that they gave.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
It was very
yes,
difficult
yes.
to get a certificate.
And by the time that my aunt, my grandmother and aunt came, we were settled. We had a large apartment in Jerusalem. And within the same year, my father got a job in the Kupat Cholim. So they weren't rich or comfortable, but they were all right, you know.
So I want to ask you,
They had a maid, you know. They had a maid from A to Z all the time. Yeah.
Jacob, I want to ask you, going on the boat, coming here from you left from Warsaw,
Poland.
from Poland, you went to via Italy.
We went to yes.
Do you know where in Italy?
But
Do you remember
Do you know
where?
which port in Italy you lived?
yes, in the north. What's it called?
Trieste? Could it have been Trieste?
Trieste.
Trieste?
Trieste.
No,
it
no.
was
What is the
Trieste.
famous harbor? All the boats to Palestine used to go from. I'll tell you in a moment.
Okay, a lot went from Trieste as well. It's not so far from Venice, but Trieste. A lot
It's in that area. Yes, I'll tell you in a moment
And-
what it was
And
called.
how was the
Was it
trip?
Venice?
But
How was the trip going on the boat? Do you remember that?
there were other people who were going to Palestine, you see. So there were people later on whom I found in my school in Jerusalem by chance, you know.
How long was that trip? Do you remember how long it took?
Less than a week. But you couldn't get on the boat on Shabbat and you couldn't get off the boat on Shabbat during the week. You had to leave in the middle of the week or even 2 days or day before Shabbat, and stay and wait in the boat, and when the boat goes, you're on the boat. But they had kosher food.
They had kosher food on the
Yeah. They
Really?
had kosher food because they had Jewish clients.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But I'll tell you in a moment, what was it called? The harbor in northern Italy. It'll come to me in a moment here.
And when you first came, did the boat come to Haifa?
Not to
Oh,
Haifa. You went to
Tel Aviv?
Jaffa, weren't you?
You went to
Jaffa?
No, it came. There was no harbor in Tel Aviv yet, and Haifa was very new and very difficult. So they took us to Jaffa, and in Jaffa, they sent boats to get out.
Because there was no harbor there.
And at the bottom of the thing on the land, with a big head, was my grandfather. So you imagine you go to Palestine and you find an uncle and an aunt and a cousin and a cousin. I mean, so I have a vase and one thing. Our things were still packed and we didn't have everything. So my Aunt Rosa, who was the Zionist one who came earlier, who came in the 20s, and she married a lawyer. And she was very active. She was a very active Zionist. You know, she grew up during the war, and she became a Zionist. And she had a friend in Palestine. She went there and married him. That was the story. So when we came, we didn't go to live with them because we lived with the grandparents to begin with. But our things arrived. Everything arrived. The books. I think there were 26 cases of books only.
Well, you were living, when you first came, you were living on Rehava Nevi'im, correct?
Yes.
And I think Rosa at the time was living across the street. Wasn't she living across the street also on Rehava Nevi'im at the very beginning?
Hadassah was there.
Where the Hadassah school, that is where...
Hadassah was on Rehava Nevi'im too,
Yes.
the original Hadassah.
Yes.
But and his Kopat Cholim was a little further. And
Prozhinin?
but
Was it in Prozhinin already at the time?
no, it was the same site as Prozhinin, but not the same building.
And Yaakov, were you and your family, were you excited to come to well, it was to Israel, Palestine in those days?
Palestine.
Look, it was so natural for them after the disturbances, as I said, the disturbances of 69 or 59.
No, not 59.
Of 29.
Of 29.
That you had to go to Palestine to show your solidarity. So within a year of the disturbances in Palestine, they were on the boat and they took their young sister with them.
Well, that was the parent. Those were
And
the
they
parents.
traveled to Palestine. And as I said, they had relatives there, and the grandparents were already there. They sent the parents to go and made arrangements for them to have a house waiting for them, or an apartment in Tel Aviv. So when we came, grandfather was standing in the harbor of Jaffa
Yes.
with a hat with a Palestinian
And
hat.
how was it your reaction when you saw your grandfather?
It was, on the one hand, it was very normal. On the other hand, it was completely. But for children, you're an
It's an
8-year
adventure.
child and you find your grandfather. Of course, grandfather lives there. We are going there.
Wow. And coming to Yerushalayim, it must have been very special when you first saw Yerushalayim.
Well, they had visited Jerusalem because she had a sister and a brother-in-law living here.
Rosa
And they liked the atmosphere of Jerusalem and the university and the seriousness and the religion. I mean, it's a traditional city.
already
so-
then and still today.
But he didn't know where he was going to. He started writing articles for the Haaretz of then. He did all sorts of things until he went back in a year. This doctor died and he got the job within a year of our arrival. So they had a parnassah, you know.
They had a living.
And my mother could afford a maid. We had a maid every day, and a fairly large apartment with a little apartment on the roof. now my
That was on Hanevi'im Street?
Pardon?
Was that still on Hanevi'im? Or was
It's still, yes.
Yes, okay.
And when the grandmother came with her daughter, my aunt, the young aunt found a job in Tel Aviv, but she didn't have a home there. So the grandmother received our apartment on the roof in Jerusalem, and when his daughter was arranged, she went to Tel Aviv and kept house for him. And she married many years later, died 20 years or so ago, and got married.
And what school did you go to when you came?
We went to Ma'aleh, which was the religious high school.
Was Ma'aleh
It's a
Shule?
religious everything. It was a low school, a middle school, and a high school. As a matter of fact, it was building up. When we came there, the school altogether had something like, let me think, 5 classes or something like that. So I was on the 3rd, and there were 2 above me. And every year I jumped up. And then my sister went to a teacher's school, and then she went to university, and then my brother went to...
Studied medicine, but he studied medicine in Geneva, right?
He started in Geneva, and during the war he left in order to join the army in Israel. And he was in the first group of people who ended their studies, their medical studies in Jerusalem, from A to Z. There were some who got the test, but these are the people who their last school years got it as the first students.
Was it already the Hadassah Medical School?
Yes. But it was formed as they arrived. They formed part of the little group who had 2 years to terminate and were the first group to come out.
As doctors.
So he was from the very first class, from the very first.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had an extraordinary, he has, I say had because last week he was hospitalized. He's still at Hadassah now, Mount Scopus, where he was also a head of radiology during his time before he retired. And he's in a very bad shape. His kidneys don't work, and one of his lungs collapsed, and he's in a very, very bad shape. But he's still getting dialysis, etc. Because once you're in hospital, they keep you going.
Sure, it's a most amazing country. They'll never give up on anybody.
Exactly. So,
and he had an amazing medical career. He must
as well here.
Well, he grew up in the home of a doctor, and then even when he returned from his broken studies in Switzerland, he went into the medical corps of the army here, and then into university. And then when they reopened the Hadassah on Mount Scopus was closed because of the difficulty to travel there, and Hadassah moved back into the city.
Because they had the convoy. There was a terrible story with the convoy where the convoy was attacked.
So the moment that Hadassah opened again, a new Hadassah on Mount Scopus, he became the first doctor to become the head of radiology.
Really?
A very good man, and a good lecturer.
And Yaakov, you didn't want to go to medicine as well?
You didn't want to go into medicine as well?
No, I had no chance because during the war, when I was 18, I went to the British Army here.
So you joined after high school. You then went into the military service.
Yes.
And you joined the British Army.
To Egypt. No.
And I was sent to Egypt.
Alexander.
Did you join
I joined the Royal Air Force in Palestine. And they sent me to Egypt with many others. And after 2 years I came back home and everything was all right. Israel didn't exist yet.
This was after the war?
Exactly.
45.
The Palestinian what you call them, the Israeli, joined the army out of goodwill.
Voluntary.
But therefore they let us go when the war was over. So I was the first group of people who went to study at the university in England.
The London School of Economics.
And then here we have, this was your original Palestine passport.
Which is I left Yaakov Palestine also. With that passport. There was no Palestine.
I mean, there was no Israel yet. There was Palestine, but not Israel.
Wow,
I traveled back home to Israel with an Israeli passport, which I didn't have.
So this is your original with the number, the British, and it says Palestine.
Yes.
Mr. S. Walsberg. Wow.
And when I came home, they mobilized me to the Israeli army.
Yeah, so he went from the British Air Force to the Israeli army.
After 3 years of university there, they caught me here, as the law was, everybody has to go to the army. So I was 22 or 23, and I was back in an army for 2 years in Palestine, in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv mostly.
Yaakov, I want to just ask you about the war. When you, in 45, or even before, when did you first find out what had happened in Europe, how bad it was, and with the camps? And
I think we found out with everybody, mostly with everybody else. First of all, we had no news about our relatives. My mother had a brother, a sister-in-law, and a sister, a brother. I mean, there was a group of 3 families for my mother's family, 3 families in Warsaw and 1 in Poland. So we had 4 relatives, direct relatives, and we knew that there's very little to hope under Nazi Germany. So, and one uncle ran away without his wife and arrived here, and there was a couple from Poland. There were 2 couples. There was an uncle and an aunt. There was an uncle who was a doctor with a child and a wife, and there was the oldest members of my mother's family, husband and wife, who had 2 children who were already studying in Palestine. So they were there. And there was this Mamzer who left his wife there because he said he had 2 children and 2 daughters in Palestine. And he ran away to southern Russia and he saved his life. But there were 14 or 15 of us children in my generation.
Well,
and there's only 1 who got killed by the Germans. You see how there were uncles and aunts who were killed and older people who were killed. But in my generation, everybody, I think 13 or 14 of us were not in Europe anymore.
You were here.
The ones who were Zionists came to Palestine before the war, and the ones who were in Holland, I told you there was 1 lot that went to Holland, they ran in the night across the border into Switzerland.
The children, the youngsters, his cousins.
And they saved themselves. There were 4 of them, 3 and
but the parents got killed. The parents were taken away.
And the parents stayed behind, and she stayed behind with the daughter who was 10 years old in Holland. And the Nazis were already there.
And they didn't survive.
They didn't survive, but the daughter
was sent to a camp of children because the grown-ups were sent to...
I'll tell you about her in a minute. Just go ahead.
So there was this little 10-year-old girl. She's still living in Tel Aviv.
Ruti Pick. Her name is Ruti Pick, of course, and you know that her son ended up marrying the daughter of Steph Wertheim.
Yeah.
Ruti Pick's son. And they got divorced. It was Judy Wertheim, but they have, 2 children together who are, of course, whose name is Pick.
And they sent the children and the brothers and sisters from Switzerland sent us a message to Palestine to say we need money in order to pay the underground to get the little girl, a 14-year-old girl, away from...
10-year-old.
from the place in Switzerland and
In Holland.
In Holland.
and Holland across the border to some. So we collected the money here in Palestine. We sent the money illegally
Wow.
to Switzerland, and Switzerland paid the
person who brought her to
Yeah.
to the top of a mountain. I remember you told me that.
Yeah, but we sent money
Down.
from Palestine.
And that saved her life.
It saved her life, and
And
she ended coming here.
They got her off a train on the border of Switzerland and France, and they said run with the little suitcase.
And she was only 14
She
years
ran
old.
over, and the brothers and
10.
sisters
Yeah,
were on
she
the
was
other
10 years
side.
old.
She was 10
10 years
old.
old.
And
Yeah.
she still lives here, yes.
This in Tel Aviv, yeah.
Amazing. And are you in touch with her? Do you have?
We were always in touch with her. Lately we actually have to give her a call.
She's an older lady,
in
I'm an
retirement.
older gentleman.
She's
We
in
don't live in the
retirement.
same city. We call each other for Yontav, etc.
I sometimes find out through the daughter of the pigs. In other words, because she has Steph Wertheim bought a beautiful house on Balfour Street and gave it to his daughter. So she sometimes rents it out, and then she calls me because I'm still working real estate through Werner Laval originally. But that's another story. Okay.
Amazing. This is really something.
Yeah.
But can I just ask, when your family, when you found out the horrors, the terrible horrors what happened in the Shoah, it
Well-
must have been devastating when all the news started coming through.
Yes, so you had those who had imagination and who had, you see, the parents were not safe, the uncles and aunts, the ones who stayed in Warsaw and in Switzerland, in Holland. But the children, there was one cousin who was married, there were two cousins who were not married in Holland, and they ran away and called the sister, but they called us and
you
the family
can help
here
them.
to send them the money to pay the French who would bring them across the border. And she didn't know what she's doing. They said, you're going to meet your brothers and sisters. So they took her, you run, when you put a foot down, you're already in Switzerland. And she was in Switzerland. She went to school there for a number of years and came here and married and had children.
Amazing, amazing.
So there were families, but
Yeah, the
if you think of
foresight.
others, all the cousins of my mother, the nephews, etc., those who were not Zionists and those who were not religious, etc.
And in Germany, what happened to friends or relatives in Germany?
We didn't have too many. We didn't have too many.
But they never made it.
No. But from Germany there was a chance to get out in a way. The uncle and aunt who lived in Germany, went over to Holland. They should have gone on to some other
They
place.
stayed in Holland. No one knew. No one.
Yes, but Switzerland, Holland was also captured. You had to go a little bit further.
And Yaakov, can I just ask? It must have been difficult for you, being part of the British Army. This is a difficult question. That Britain had the white paper, which was a very draconian.
But we did our things. No, we weren't happy about the policy towards the Arabs, etc. And there were more Arabs in the world, and it was more interesting to be nice to the Arabs than to the Jews. But anybody who wanted to come came illegally, came in the middle of the night, came with wrong papers, with anything.
No, but I think you were talking about how you felt about the British.
That they had the white, that they instituted and they upheld the white paper that prevented.
Okay, so they weren't friendly. They didn't kill themselves for us.
That's for sure.
But did you
But
feel,
they didn't stop us in a very brutal way. There were always people who were
there were
stealing
a lot of
them.
illegal immigration as well.
Yeah.
And how was your relations with the British Army?
when you were at the Air Force?
being in
Most
the-
of us went and served in the British Army. I
But
mean,
what did you do when you were?
Was it a positive? Did you ever feel any?
so we didn't argue with the British about it. But
Very diplomatic.
I lived in the same tent in Switzerland when I was in the British Army.
You mean in Egypt, not in Switzerland?
I was in Egypt, but it was full of. It was the British Army that I was in with the title and everything.
And how long were you in Egypt? Stationed in Egypt?
2 years I was there.
You were in Cairo or in which city?
Alexandria?
Alexandria.
Were you where were you in Egypt? In Alexandria or?
No, we were on the
Cairo?
canal. I spent weekends in Cairo and Alexandria.
Did you
but
ever go to the shul in Alexandria? They've got a very large shul in Nabi Samuel. I was
Sure,
there.
synagogue.
Very large.
I
synagogue.
must have been, but not too much. I tell you, for somebody who wasn't used to travel on Shabbat, it was difficult. So I used to go to
Cairo?
no, Cairo is easier because in Cairo I was staying with Jewish friends. Whereas
They had a big Jewish community.
yes,
in
and a very rich one.
In downtown Cairo, there's a beautiful shul that I've been inside.
And we met people that my mother had been when my father was working and mother was sending us to school, she took a trip with other doctors to Egypt. And she knew that my father had studied under professor of medicine in Berlin. He said, I remember that this man in Berlin had a daughter who married a Jew from Egypt. And she looked him up when she was living in a nice hotel, etc., with all the other professors from Jerusalem, from Israel. And they were very nice and they took her around, etc.
Was it the Weiser family?
The Weisers. And they had 2 sons. One son was my age, or was, he's dead.
He passed away, yes.
So I found when I came as a soldier to Egypt, I didn't have to go to anything. I used to go there and get kosher
Weiser
food.
family.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and I had a vacation twice or 3 times a month over the weekend, so I could take a stop at an English car, at lorry, and go to Egypt and return.
Me to Cairo.
But
Then you would go to Cairo.
go to Cairo every time, and I had a place to go to, like a home. And the young man was my age, more or less.
Because there was quite a big Jewish community till
Yes,
most literally.
they were owners of pharmacies.
There
There were
pharmacists.
Palestinians who studied abroad. There was no medicine here, so the old man
Weiser.
lived here. He was an early
Pioneer.
an early pioneer, son of early pioneers, and they sent him away to Switzerland or to Germany to study, and he decided Egypt is a good country to go to. So he went to there and he opened 3 pharmacies and had himself lived like a lord.
Like Lawrence, okay.
And I lived in a lord on account of their successes. And then the son came to study in Palestine and stayed with us, and we were very friendly. It was a friendship of several years.
The friendship still continues with Gérard's younger brother, Roland, who now lives in Denver, Colorado.
We still
and who
correspond.
is still writing to us, and as a matter of fact,
It's a
he's writing
friendship of 60 or more years,
more than 60 years.
Yeah.
And can I
80
ask,
years,
when you
or 70 years.
after the war,
No, but I didn't meet them when I was in the...
No, so when you were 20.
Also, that was the younger one, so I hardly
No.
knew. There was the little brother. But then the little brother went to live in Europe, and
And then, no, in America, didn't he go to America?
then in America, yes.
Okay.
well, when you went to study in England in the School of Economics,
Yes.
what made you decide to study economics?
Look, I had already I had the 2 years of British Army behind me. And I had my fears that I'll have to go and join the army when the Palestinians or the Israelis will have an army of their own. So I didn't think that I had too much of a chance. I said, I'll get some kind of title and get the practice, you know, and do things about my English culture, the English language and all the rest of it, you know. Although I was speaking English, there was no problem. But still, it was normal to go and get the feeling of Britain. And I didn't suspect, I didn't know that the army would, the university would be closed for me, because I had already studied, already served in the army. It was too much, you know.
And how long were you in the University of London studying economics?
London School of Economics.
And where?
How long were you in the London School of Economics? How long did you stay there? 2 years?
I was there for 2 years and another year.
3 years.
And you got your degree?
No, I got a title.
A title?
Yeah.
Because you didn't have a chance to
Did
finish.
you have any family in England, or when you were there?
I don't think so.
Did you have family? No, you had.
No, but many acquaintances.
Many acquaintances.
And
Like
also
Al-Salvi.
there were people who served in the British Army
that
during
you-
the wars as I did. And then I met the Jews and I started going to synagogue with others. And there was a girlfriend who was...
Al-Salvi, who actually was hoping to marry him, but he didn't. I mean, Jackie didn't marry her, but she
no,
came
it
to
was a
Israel
big crowd of
because
Palestinians.
And then when you came back after you got your degree, or you got your...
I was put, after a few months, I was already in the foreign ministry. And I discovered that...
Not in the foreign ministry, you were in the Prime Minister's office. When
No,
you first
but-
came back.
But this
But
is
then when you
before
came
I
back-
was recruited, when I came home, I already got a job in the foreign ministry for the first few months. And then suddenly
Oh.
I was given the order to join the army again for
what-
2 years.
But wait a second, but before you came back, while you were still at the London School of Economics, I remember you told me that you were, in the summers, you used to go to Switzerland and you were the secretary to Weizmann.
Yes, but that didn't help me.
No, but you remember you were the secretary, the personal secretary to Chaim Weizmann?
When he was in
In Switzerland.
In
when he was in Switzerland being operated, before going to Palestine to Israel,
Become the first president.
I was with him for several months after the operation, and take him to,
Here you have a picture of Chaim Weizmann.
yes,
And you took this picture?
you must show me. Probably yes, because I was a,
He loves to photograph. He's a wonderful
I-
photographer. So he always
my
took
father came back
photos.
from one of his trips to Europe when I was a boy of perhaps 13 or 14. My father came with a photo, with
The
a,
camera.
yeah, with a camera.
And-
So I had a camera since I was a young boy.
And how was the relationship with Chaim Weizmann?
Your relationship.
He was a man in his 70s or 80s, and I was a young man in his 20s, you know. But he was a very warm man.
Yeah.
He had one son who was a bit of a schmuck. So I don't know, I don't think he had too much nachas. He had a wife, he still had, I don't, she's probably dead too, who was, she had a mirshat. She wasn't a very, she was a big snob. He was the great leader.
He was an amazing person.
Yeah,
He was-
but she was a snob. So she used to teach me things, not to use certain words, because I didn't use dirty words, but I used common words.
Oh, you were a young man.
Yeah, I spoke like people my age spoke.
But did you think that he was going to become the first president of the state of Israel?
Did you know already then that
Did
he
you know?
was?
Did you have a feeling that he would become the first president?
But he would.
Yeah. Did you
Oh,
feel?
there he was. he was elected in Palestine, but he had an operation and he had the treatment in Switzerland.
And that's when you went to help him.
And that's when I was in Switzerland, just I don't know.
But did you have a feeling that he was going to become the first president?
Yes, he was he was the only person who was in the line of being elected, yes.
Because, you know, they say he was a lot because of his connections with and look, his discoveries of acetone and
all the important Palestinians or Jews or friends, etc., came through Switzerland to wish him luck. So I was in the atmosphere of the. But then I came back to Palestine, to Israel, to find that I have to go to the army and receive nothing at all. No.
And what did you?
2 years.
What did you do in the army?
In the army, I had a good job. I was in the department of, how should you call them? I was in the research department of the highest level of, all sort of serious activities which were more political than military. And they discovered right away that they found in me somebody who spoke French, German, and English fluently. I understood Russian, some Polish, all of Yiddish. I mean, where do you have people with 3 or 4 or 5 languages? So they put me right away in the department in Tel Aviv, outside of Tel Aviv. And I had some problem with that foot, etc. I wasn't in the greatest health, but I was in Tel Aviv and I was living with relatives there. So I had an easy time, a lot of experience. I met many people. And after 2 years, the High Army and the Army courses were closed and finished. All the activities that I could do in all respects, were locked. People, after 3 years of the existence of Palestine, there was no need for additional people. And all of those who had been soldiers during the war or during the hard days had found a job, and I had nothing at all. So I said again, you had nothing at all, but you had a very good job in the army. Try to do something which suits your.
So is that when you went into the Prime Minister's office?
And then they offered me right away in the Prime Minister's office. They said, we need people who know 3 or 4 languages. I mean, that's a lot. And literally so, I mean. So here I was with my 4 languages, and they gave me a job in the press division.
Of the Prime Minister's office?
Yeah, because they needed people whom you could mobilize, especially the press officers who came from abroad, who spoke French and English and German. I mean, you could mobilize me when a journalist would come from abroad and say, Jackie Aviad, you take this one, you take that one, you take that one. So here I was, and I made interesting acquaintances, and some people whom I met here, I later on met in America and in France. So I had an interesting time. But how much time do you want to run around with journalists? So they had another job for me, and they said, we are opening an office to guide press people who are coming from Palestine to Israel. We need a body of people who can accompany people who come and don't know a word of Hebrew, and who have been taken around Palestine for a week or 10 days.
It was already Israel then.
Pardon?
It was already Israel.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So here I was, and I was transferred from one department to another department, which was intelligent.
Intelligent.
very interesting people who came from big newspapers and big televisions and radios, etc. They used to come, and they could always take me for anybody. Perhaps not those who spoke Russian, but French, German, French, German, and English. I could take care of all their guests. They would give me a car and say, take so-and-so man, and he's interested in A, B, C, and D.
And
So I had a couple of years. It was very interesting until the head of the
Teddy Kollek,
yeah,
head of the Prime Minister's office, was Teddy Kollek at the time.
yeah.
And Teddy, yes, go ahead.
So they said, we have a job abroad for you if you're ready to go abroad again. And they offered me, first of all, they transferred me to the press office. I mean, as a member of the Israeli press office, which gave me the title of somebody who has a rank, as though I'd passed 4 or 5 stages already. So I jumped ahead. I didn't go to any of the schools or any
You went
equipment
straight from the Prime Minister's office to the Foreign Ministry.
with a title.
With a
And can I
title.
just ask, in the Prime Minister's office, did you have a close connection with Ben Gurion?
I knew him. There's people whom I knew better, but I knew him because everybody had dealings with him. And
Here's a picture with you and Ben Gurion.
oh yeah,
And it's interesting because it was printed by Ruminger in
By David
Jerusalem.
Hubinger, who was a
Yeah.
good friend of ours. by
And
the
he
way.
was an amazing photographer.
He was an extraordinary photographer. He was even here on Jackie's 90th birthday because we were good friends. We were very good friends of David's, and we miss him still.
Here's a picture with you that I think you took of Ben Gurion.
yeah. But still, I saw more of him in the south. When he was already in
Still
retreat.
Butler.
When I used to take guests from abroad to Weizmann, I used to go to.
To Ben Gurion.
To Ben Gurion, I used to go down to the Negev and see him. So even during his last years, I used to visit in the south of the Negev always.
And you had a
But I had very close relations with the mayor of Jerusalem.
Teddy
Teddy.
Kollek.
That was Teddy
course.
Kollek. So
Oh.
Teddy Kollek is the
I
one
want
who
to tell you
said,
something.
You're wasting Aviad with the press things, etc. He has to go to the Foreign Service and be active in the Foreign Service. And he offered me the first job in the service. When I was being chosen, they said, I know him, I've known him for many years. Ben Gurion, not Ben Gurion, what's we call him? No. The Rosh Ha'ir, the mayor of Jerusalem.
Teddy Kollek.
Teddy Kollek came on one of his trips to Paris when I was a representative of the guest department of the Prime Minister's office. So he said, hey, you're looking for somebody. Where was it? In New York, I think. There's Aviad there who's just joined this
But
office.
I just want to ask, here we have pictures of you, well, that you took of Golda Meir. I mean,
Yeah.
You knew all the Levi
Golda
Eshkol.
came to New York, I think, when you were first.
Everybody,
when
yes.
you were in New York City.
Yes.
Were you your first consul? Do you remember what your
And she
status
asked me
was?
to be an interpreter for her and also.
Who,
yeah.
Golda.
But
Yeah.
now you followed in your father's footsteps because your father was a diplomat
Yes,
in
they
Scandinavia.
all knew my father's name and they knew my mother, who was a good hostess. And
Your
when
father
I-
was the first ambassador to Scandinavia.
Your father was the first ambassador to Scandinavia.
That's right.
And that was, I think, straight after the state was established in 48.
Right away.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow, and your father being a diplomat, did that help you in your career also?
I
in
would
Germany?
say yes. I mean, it made it all. It did make
It made it easier.
being a diplomat a strange activity.
Because he
I was a son of a diplomat, you know. And
he also spent time in Switzerland as a diplomat, your father.
yes.
That's where he passed away. When Jackie
yes.
was actually, I think you were stationed in France at the time, when your father was in Switzerland,
Switzerland,
and then he passed away there.
So we were diplomats at the same time, but not very long.
But that's amazing. I think that's unique, that you have a father and a son, both diplomats in the newly established state of Israel.
Yeah.
Yes, and look, if you think of how many years I passed in all sorts of different careers, but a lot of experiences, you know, because it meant languages, it meant travel, it made connections, it made the knowing of the world, you know.
I just on a personal note, Yaakov, did you know Yaakov Varhaftig?
I know Verhaftig more by, not as a personal friend.
Because he was very involved with Mizrahi as well, and he was very involved with the Sukihara visas. And
I don't think we ever worked together, but his name was a well-known name, you know, one knew him.
And Berg, you knew Berg very well.
Yeah.
And your family stayed in touch with the Bergs?
Naturally.
Well, I remember we still went to the wedding of Borg's son, Avraham, when he
Yes.
got married.
Yeah.
When he was, before he went off on a tangent.
Wow. And which other Israeli leaders did you have a close connection with?
Rabin.
It's hard to count, really. No, because
Many.
I was in a position where all the important people came and rubbed their way against you, you know. I was serving in the countries which the Israelis used to, the diplomats and others used to come. So it was all of Switzerland, it was most of the United States, it was France. So here I was in one of the, and in every one there was an ambassador that was there, you know, and a professor in the study. So as the years went on, very often I used to be the top Israeli in that particular. So I used to see them at the airport and bring them in, so the yichus and the yachsanut, I was the yachsan myself, but in my position I was a yachsan, you know.
And Yaakov, can I ask, out of all the Israeli leaders, who did you admire the most? Or who stood out as exceptional?
It's very hard to say. It's very, look, the names that we mentioned here are the very outstanding ones. So there are very few people about whom the Minister of Foreign Affairs, etc., had a good, warm relationship. And then a few years later, he decided, I must find a decent job for Jackie Aviad, whom I've known so well. So I wasn't doing them a favor, I was just doing my duty. But I was in places, in corridors in which important people moved, you know, and I moved as well because it was my job to move, you know.
We also have an amazing picture with Rav Herzog, whose son now is the president, and his brother's the ambassador to America.
That's correct.
And his father Chaim, and his grandfather was the chief rabbi. And here's a picture with the chief rabbi, Isaac
You know,
Herzog.
they came to one of the Zionist meetings in the 30s. He was an active Zionist. He used to go to Zionist congresses, even though he was a chief rabbi in Ireland. He used to come and extremely loyal. So in one of his visits to Palestine, he had a long conversation with my father, and he told my father that he wants to send his oldest son, who was 16, into Palestine to a kibbutz, to study. You know,
Yeshiva? No.
Yeah. He was going to send his son to the yeshiva in Jerusalem, but not to the school not to the place where one lives in the yeshiva, but a decent Jewish home. This was the home of my parents, right?
He lived at his parents.
I was 12 years old or so.
And he stayed in your home?
they
Yes,
sent them,
of course.
but they didn't come. They went home to Ireland until 2 or 3 years later when he came as chief rabbi.
But Chaim stayed in your home?
Yes.
And he stayed out
And
for
he was-
years, and
and he
several
was-
addresses, yes.
And he was our best
He
man
shared
as
rooms.
well, together with Joseph Burg, the two of them.
Book and
And Chaim were our best men when you married me, or when
Yes.
I married you.
no, but and other people who we were very close to, and who were close to them. So it's
And you have a good, close connection with
With Bougie, not so
with
much.
Bougie?
We don't know. I mean, I don't. We haven't. We were basically very friendly with Ora and Chaim, and when they were presidents, you know, Jackie knew them very well. But at the time, were you also chief of protocol when Chaim was president, or was?
I'm
no,
not sure.
No, you weren't.
I think he was already fed on.
Afterwards. So they,
Yeah.
but we were very often invited to many of the events that took place at the
Always.
presidents.
And,
Unless I organized them, yeah.
and Abe Ban, you had a connection with Abe Ban?
Aber Iban. Well, I met him through you. He was
Yeah,
also, wasn't he also in New York? He was, wasn't he ambassador at the United Nations when in
Yes.
1971 when I met you in New York?
But when he
And then-
grew into his real importance, my father was already dead.
Your father was there, but
Unconscious.
you were the one.
I
who
was around and I had personal relations.
He also has a South African connection, Abe Ban.
That's right, of course.
He's
No,
one-
I-
And his English is impeccable.
It was
And I wish more
impeccable.
people spoke the way he does.
But he was,
did.
his words were, it still resonates. It was
Exactly.
incredible.
I remember he
Wow,
was.
so you both knew
But
the cream of the cream.
I
You knew-
met them. There was Joseph Tekoa, I remember, and Ruth met me and said to you that she should marry me. Remember?
Yeah.
Ruth Tekoa, the wife of Joseph
And we
Tekoa.
mentioned also with Yehuda Avner, you had a very close relation with Yehuda
Not a
Avner.
close relationship. Yehuda Avner, you knew him, but you
Yes.
yeah, but they
But
didn't.
not the
they
same
weren't-
kind of
They weren't
intimacy.
together in the same countries either. When they weren't serving the same area, so they weren't. We only met him more privately at the home of the Hammelburgers
Yes.
on Ben Maimon, who were good friends of
Yeah.
his.
Look, these are jobs in which you have a contact, not in virtue of your own genius, but in the virtue of necessity, of good order, of good services, you know.
And can I ask, with Menachem Begin, did you have a connection with Menachem Begin?
You were chief of protocol when he
Yes.
was. Yes.
You really were?
Yeah. I was on very good terms with her as well.
With Mrs. Begin,
So
with
there's
Menachem's wife, Alisa.
Elisa, yeah.
Well, you used to always have, whenever there were dignitaries who would come to Israel, you were responsible as chief of protocol to help her with events and to
Of course.
work out what presents that you had to give. Remember, you were always in touch with her
That you have to
help
give
her
them
out.
advice as to what is desirable, what isn't.
And when Sadat came here the second time and came via the airport, you know,
I was on the
you
trip.
were already chief of protocol. And was Begin still prime minister then? I think he was.
Yes.
Right. So then you were together with Begin and with Sadat and with Mr.
Yes.
Sadat. There was a picture somewhere. I don't know if I have shown it. I don't see. With Sadat and with Begin. No, I must have it somewhere. One second.
And there was somebody that I met who had a very close relationship, one of his closest friends from America, Hart Haston. Hart Haston, he, when Elisa passed away, Menachem was in America and he came back with him. Hart Haston, he was very close, but but more than just as a job, did you have a personal relationship as well with Menachem Begin?
Yes, look, it was a relationship of a very young man with a very old experience.
But was he warm? Did you find a lot of the leaders very warm towards you, or a little bit aloof?
Yes, and he was not. He was grateful, you know. It was. He had good behavior without manners, you know. He didn't have all the manners in the world, but he appreciated people who knew other languages or knew about new books, etc. You know, can I help you?
Yaakov, I just want to mention,
I don't know where I put the pictures.
after you became, sure, you were in the government press, and then you went to America, Consulate General in New York in 61 to 64. I think you were Consul General in New York.
He was number 2 in New York when I met you. That was in 70. I think you arrived there in 69, and I met you in 71. And you were number 2, and you were the liaison.
Consul General in New York.
But that's a different crowd already, yeah.
There was
The
different
younger
time.
crowd.
And then in 72, you were the Consul General of Israel to Los Angeles and to the southeastern USA.
That's right.
And I think when did you meet Elie Wiesel?
But that was much earlier.
Was that earlier?
Elie
Because-
Wiesel you met in Paris when you were
Yes.
there. And
Yeah.
didn't you help him with one of his books? Was it La Nuit? The Night?
And all sorts of things, yes, and even just social.
You helped him with his book Night or Dawn?
Remember the book La Nuit? And then also there was another one. Were you involved with the reading or going through some of his books? I mean, before they became books, just the.
I think it diminished.
No, but at first, when you were in France, you were very friendly.
We were
with
very
him.
friends when he was a bachelor, and I was one, you know, so very free young people.
But also, when you were in New York the first time, I remember you told me that you were friendly with him, and you went up to Canada, to Montreal, to visit his sister.
Yes.
Remember, and then you took some photographs
You're right.
of his during that time, right over here.
Yeah, these are the.
Pictures with Elie Wiesel, and then I also mentioned that later on you had another friend, I forgot his name, who was married to Marion, and then Marion met Elie at your apartment
Yes.
in New York City, and left her former husband and ended up marrying Elie Wiesel, and that's when, in a way, where you also left and went to Los Angeles, but then your relationship did not continue so much. I think possibly because Marion was not feeling that happy about having, broken up with her husband, who was also a friend of yours.
Yeah.
And you knew Danny Kaye as well?
Danny Kaye.
There's a
Remember
picture
Danny
of you
Kaye?
and Danny
Yeah.
Kaye when he came to Israel.
Did he come to Israel? Was that?
I think
where was
he
that?
was. He
Yeah.
did come to Israel a few times.
Yeah, that was Danny Kaye here. Remember
Yeah.
Danny Kaye?
Of course I remember that.
And you have amazing
I took
pictures.
care of him when he was here.
These
Yes.
with
You took
Isaac.
care of him
with
when he
Dan-
was here.
And Isaac Stern.
Isaac Stern. Well, Isaac Stern has been a friend of yours for years.
Yeah.
It's
Isaac
just,
and Vera.
And I
It's
used to
amazing
go
that
to
you
the
have these two-
kibbutzim or the
these-
places
Yes.
where they.
When they were young and when they were older.
He
But
came
there was
to
here there was a
perform at the
picture of
boat.
Isaac coming to Los Angeles. I helped the American Israel Culture Foundation, which was actually a baby of Isaac Stern's. And when I went to LA, we built up the American Israel Culture Foundation in Los Angeles as well. And Isaac used to come with some of the fine musicians from Israel who had gotten scholarships from the American Israel Culture Foundation, and had receptions at our home. And then we got people together who then started the Friends of the American Israel Culture Foundation in Los Angeles. And I was the one
This is
had
amazing.
that,
And
got that started.
Yaakov, where was this when you were representing Israel? Do you recall which?
This picture was that, I think
you
it was
must
in
have represented
Montreal.
Israel in many forums.
Was this in Montreal or was this in France when you were at UNESCO? I don't remember. It was you were representing Israel somewhere.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't say anything.
And then you were appointed ambassador to the Philippines in 1980.
Correct.
That's right.
Now it must have been very symbolic because the Philippines was one of the very few countries that actually wanted to accept Jews during the...
Yes, the Chinese wouldn't let us come in. I couldn't go and visit China. I can do it without a name, without a...
I know, but the Philippines were very... In their history, with the Shoah, with the Holocaust, they were willing to allow Jews to...
Exactly. Yes. And I profited from it. And someone pursued...
because the relationship was always a very warm one.
It's a very warm...
And Imelda, used to always make sure... Imelda Marcus, it was a time of the Marcuses, just before they fell apart. And I remember Imelda used to always, whenever she would see me, if I couldn't always come to all of her activities, because I also had small children at the time, she would say, Eva, you were not at this party. So I said, that's right, because I had to go pick up my children, or I had to do this. I had small children to deal with as well. But she remembered always when I was not, present at one of her receptions. Usually I was. But
and how long were you both doing ambassadorial in the Philippines?
We were actually there only for 2.5 years, because Jackie didn't feel, he got sick at some point, and the heat did not go well with you, the heat in the Philippines.
Well, it went well with very few people.
And anyway, at some point, you decided that you prefer to be...
Look, anybody who served in the Philippines for 2 years, and has gone to show how many...
No, but anyway, you continued on, and there was no embassy open at that point when he wanted to leave, so you became Consul General in Montreal. So he went over to Canada at that point.
Yeah.
Remember?
And when you were in the Philippines, you mentioned that you met with the Iranian...
Yes, at one of the parties, one of the things was they didn't have a chief of protocol like my husband, so they used to put people together, with the East Germans with whom we didn't have relations at the time, and with the Iranians and so on. So I remember once at one of the parties, and the Iranians were saying, we had just gotten Begin became, our prime minister, and all the years before you had the Labour Party. So this was a new experience for us while we were in the Philippines. And they had just gotten their Ayatollah Khomeini, and I remember the Iranian fellow saying to me, don't worry, in a couple of years you'll have a new prime minister, and in a couple of years we will also have a new leadership. The difference is that we continue to be a democracy and change, prime ministers, whereas they are still stuck with this terrible Iran, which of course became, what it is today for Israel, a real threat, obviously.
And Eva, can I just ask, how did it feel like being the wife of an ambassador, representing Israel abroad? It was much easier to represent Israel abroad for me, because my Hebrew was lousy to begin with. I didn't have a Jewish background. My parents, that's another story, came from Germany and ended up in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and sent me on to boarding schools in Florida and university and graduate school and so on. And I taught French in New York. So it was easy to become to be his wife in LA, where I could also act a little bit, and they would not know that I wasn't always, a true Israeli, but a married into Israel Israeli. But I loved it, and my husband was wonderful. I remember always being very proud of him when he would get up and give his speeches everywhere and to help Israel. Of course, at that time, Israel really needed, the support of the Jewish communities. And we went to many, many, many chicken dinners, in Saturdays, all over. When he was Consul General in LA, of course, he was also representing Israel in the other Western states, as well as Hawaii.
So we traveled a lot.
So we traveled a great deal, and I used to always, be helpful. And back in LA itself, we had lots of receptions and dinners and so on. Pardon? The Hebrew sort of... Look, I was abroad, and then I came here, and Werner Loval said, Eva, with all of your, many contacts all over the world, please come and work for Anglo-Saxon. So I said, but I'm a French teacher. He said, don't worry, we'll teach you. So they taught me, and that's how I started actually going into becoming a real estate broker.
And speaking Hebrew.
Through the help of Verda and Pamela, who actually were very close friends. Jackie was the best man to Verna and
Really?
Pamela when they got married.
Because he's from Germany as well.
Yes, he's from Germany, and he was also in the foreign ministry before he started Anglo-Saxon. So you've known him for many years, and you became. They are still friends. We still get together.
For Colombia.
No, for Guatemala.
Guatemala.
And I just found an apartment for rent for the new ambassador of Guatemala.
That's wonderful.
As well, in real estate. Yeah.
And how, from being in the Philippines, then you became the ambassador to UNESCO in Paris.
Yes, that was after he was chief of protocol here. Yes.
And how was that position in UNESCO?
How was your position at UNESCO? How did you feel when you were in Paris at UNESCO? Because it was not they weren't very happy with us.
Because UNESCO, even to this very day, it's...
no, but many of the colleagues, like the Canadians and the Americans, the others...
And the French.
Were very friendly, you know.
With us, yes.
They helped me find ways which for an Israeli weren't always easy. They always said, well, you come to our house, we'll get invited. You'll get invited with the right people.
And it helped you as well. With
it helped a great deal.
Well, you had to, to represent Israel properly there too, which wasn't always easy, of course.
I'm sure it must have been very difficult because you've had so much of the world media and so many countries against Israel. Even to this very day, we have so many problems where things are improving, but very gradually. But some of the resolutions are...
Oh, now they got much worse after we left.
Yeah.
Because you were there to 1990, and although they were never really friends of ours, I mean, the organization...
Well, there were always people who were not friends and who didn't become friends with it, but there were enough who were friendly in them.
Oh, but it's a remarkable career that you've had. And even it's a remarkable journey that you've had with
Jackie.
With Jackie. It's an incredible career that you both had. And raising a family as well at the same time.
Yes, well, they're all, because of the fact that we traveled a great deal and represented Israel abroad, I used to send my daughters, because I didn't have the Yiddishkeit that he was brought up with and he was working. I used to send my children every year, no matter where we were stationed, to Camp Ramah in Addison, Ontario, in Canada. And two of my daughters, were there for quite some time, but then they would not go every summer. But my middle daughter, Gabi, just loved Camp Ramah and used to go back every year from the time she was 9 years old, from the time that when you were stationed in Montreal. And basically what happened with her is that she was a counselor at Camp Ramah. She fell in love with a young man from Montreal, but she still, when she returned here, she finished, university.
Served in the army.
She served in the army and went 1 year at Hebrew University, but then decided to switch to University of Toronto, where she got her MA in architecture, and she is an architect in Canada today. And is married to a very nice young gentleman who's a doctor in 2 hospitals there, a psychiatrist.
And the little girls speak
And they have
English.
2 lovely daughters. They wanted to have their bat mitzvah this month, December, here, but because of what's going on, because of COVID, they're hoping to try again in March to see what happens. So Gabi lives in Toronto, and then we have our daughter Shuli, our youngest one, who studied film actually at Tel Aviv University, married an Israeli who became the CEO of an Israeli company in Berlin. And so they're still living in Berlin.
You have the connection going back to Berlin.
Yes, exactly. My daughter kept saying, "Mommy, why didn't you and Daddy teach me German?" So I said, "Because we taught you French and taught you English, and your father taught you Hebrew. So who would have ever thought, in a million years, that you would end up in Berlin, which is where you know,
Also,
your
the
dad was
memories
born.
of Germany were so glorious.
Yeah.
But is it a temporary or are they there for?
No, it's temporary. I mean, the company was sold actually to a firm in America, and her husband is now working on other possibilities. They were actually thinking of moving to Singapore last March, in 1920, when Corona came to us, and so they didn't go. But so they're still in Germany. But you know how it is today. One works through, the internet and so on. One doesn't really, and Zoom. One doesn't necessarily have to be in the country. But my son-in-law is working on new projects, and my daughter is still there taking care of 2 small children. But they are coming in another week and a half here. Hopefully all will be well.
And if you learn
then we have
Hebrew,
one
she's
daughter
going to learn
who was an art historian that learned at Hebrew University and worked at Christie's in Tel Aviv. And at some point they moved. They sold their apartment. It was too small. They had a 3rd child, and they moved to Binyamina, where they built a house, and that's where they live now. And Tammy is no longer with Christie's, but she is working for a grape concern and doing very well.
That's wonderful.
So those are our kids, our children.
That's lovely. So if I had to ask you both, what advice can you impart, or what advice do you give to future generations? You've seen the worst, from the Shoah, from fleeing Germany, to seeing the miracle of the establishment of the State of Israel. You've witnessed Jewish history. Very few people have had the great zchut, the great privilege. And you've been part of this Jewish history. You are part of the Jewish history.
Yes, but in a very positive and aim to live usefully and to live with those who make sense, and to know how to fight those who cannot make sense. I mean, you learn the good and the bad, and you learn languages, and you learn the habits, and
What advice would you give? Do you give to your grandchildren and to the future generations?
What advice would you give to your children and grandchildren? Oh, to your grandchildren,
I
not
don't
more.
know. They have to develop a certain personality. And the easiness and learning languages and taking on to other scientists.
We gave them Jewish values, and and I find that my children are all honest and are all doing very well, and they're wherever they
and they've lived abroad, and they've lived
they're definitely
happily.
Yeah, and I think that there are many challenges that they are facing that we didn't have to face. We had, in that respect, from after the war to now, our lives were easier than the ones that our children and grandchildren are having to face. And I can only say that they, as long as they have the Jewish values, the honesty, and caring and knowing how to deal with human beings and caring about others, I hope that they'll manage, nevertheless, to be happy and to have good lives, because I don't know what's going to be, quite honestly, right?
Yes.
We won't have to worry so much with global warming. We have enough already here. There's no winter. It's not going to get better. So they have big challenges, and we hope that we've taught them, to be positive and to try to overcome.
So I just want to thank you both. I'm just going to come in. If you could just move a teeny bit. Wow. So I just want to mention, it's been the greatest honor and a privilege to be with you both.
Yeah.
I'm really, when you look at these pictures and when you hear your story, you really lived Jewish history. You lived the most amazing.
100%.
And up to my 80th birthday, really, never stopping. I mean, I retired, I had a heart attack, and I retired when I was in my mid-60s. And I
From the foreign
worked on
ministry.
for another 15
Amazing.
years on different good
Yeah.
jobs, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, just seeing what's happening today. I know you said it's worrying when you hear so much anti-Israel and BDS and those that want to boycott. But on the other hand, you see the Arab countries, you see the Abraham Accords, and you see
Yes.
the UAE, where there's such genuine friendships that have been established
growing.
from countries that we would never have dreamt would have happened. So it must give a lot of optimism as well. And to see this country flourishing and to see that we're the startup nation.
It's unbelievable. That is really
it's incredible.
extraordinary. It really is. When
The
you think-
Jerusalem that you came to and the Jerusalem today, or the country, it must be remarkable just walking down the street.
70-something years, and
Yeah.
look what they've done in those 70-something years. It's really 75. How many
Yeah,
years are we?
it's,
70.
Look, from 48 to now, it's quite unbelievable. It's not a long time. And you have really, and you've been in the journey with your husband, and it must be the most incredible honor to
Yes.
serve your people and your country.
But it's luck too. I mean, we went on a very fine road, you know, a fine route, and we didn't live in countries where they hated Jews or where they hated
Except for UNESCO, which
Israelis or where
wasn't
they
easy.
loved Arabs. We had the road was there for us, and we took it, you know. But we took it without making the world crazy. We took it by having certain gracefulness, you know.
Particularly, I want to mention what really I'm so absolutely not amazed, but it's very incredible to think what your parents, they had the insight
To come here.
to come here, to leave everything, to leave. Your father had most probably a very flourishing practice, and he was head of the Mizrahi, and they had a beautiful home. To leave it and to come to a foreign land, they had the insight, and it's incredible that they did that.
But his
Yeah.
heart was
a
always for
certain
the
amount
Jews.
of wit and intelligence, and
Foresight.
And I think being head of Mizrahi is very Zionistic, and in a way, thank God he did, because it saved you and your family.
yeah.
Wow. So I
And
want to
then-
thank you both. Really, thank you so much. And
When
thank
do
you
we
And
so
then he had
much.
to, and then of course I became, I had to have a kosher home all through my life, and of course, having lived in Haiti, I didn't have that, but I learned. And being a Yeke, of course, as well, you know, I always made sure that everything here was perfect, because I would not have strayed away from being this way, because then it wouldn't have any sense. I don't come from a religious family, but I just, you know, believe in our value system, and I'm somewhat unhappy when I see, look, when I first came here, he was my first religious boyfriend, you know, and then I married him. I used to think that if you're religious, you have to be an honest human being.
Yeah.
And I was shocked when I came here and I found, you know, became was, you know, exposed to our politicians and so on,
It's
and
very
our religious politicians, and I was in shock, because I didn't believe that they went together. And of course, having him as my husband, who was always straight, you know, it didn't make any sense. It really didn't. And I still feel that somehow, you know, people have got to
Okay, I couldn't agree more.
keep the 10 Commandments. In Haiti, you know, we didn't have synagogues or anything. My father always said, Eva, keep the 10 Commandments, and if you can do that, you'll be a good Jew.
It's a wonderful message.
And easy,
You gave a very good
easy
advice.
recommendation.
So that's what I tried to do.
Now,
And I,
when
you know,
how and when
And
do
I
we carry on?
didn't give you anything.
But thank you so much, both of you, and you should just have
And thank you.
Mazel and Brocha.
Yeah.
I'd maybe stream Eva, just Mazel and Brocha. No, just from you and your dear family, you should both only know Mazel Brocha at Mayve stream in good health, and nachas from your children and grandchildren. And thank you so both very, very much.
You're very welcome.
No, how and when do we meet again?
Oh, it will be lovely to meet again. Thank
We
you.
will invite you. This is a painting that was done of Sonia, Yaakov's mother, when she was maybe 19 or 20 years old, and it's just been with her in her home, and then came to our home. You know.
So this is the original from.
Yes, and she actually lived until she was almost 100. We were even planning her 100th birthday. It didn't happen, but that whole her side of the family, have all ended up, 98, 99, 100, 101. It's quite amazing. They had.
And this is the original,
jeeps.
the original
That was
painting.
the original painting.
It could have been done in Slonim as well.
It was done in Slonim. Yep.
It's magnificent. If you can show this beautiful picture.
Oh.
And you've both been married nearly 50 years, Ken and Hora. Wow, this is wonderful. So, what advice would you give for such a wonderful marriage, for staying together?
Having having good characters, I would say.
Honest.
And honest.
That's such beautiful advice. So, many, many more years together in just happiness and health.
Thank you.
And nachas.
Thank you very much.